getting a vacation rental before Airbnb was a nightmare. The technology was terrible. You might end up having to call some local place to rent it out. You have to sign a bunch of contracts. Airbnb really solved that problem. But now, Airbnb has done such a good job that it's basically a monopoly. And what that means is a way worse experience for all of us, the customers. So like at a hotel, Marriott and Hyatt are all in intense competition with each other to offer the best possible product. Like a big part of my job is comparing the rewards programs at Marriott and Hyatt. But because Airbnb doesn't have any competition, it has no incentive to create a rewards program. So you could stay at an Airbnb all year and not achieve elite status or get Airbnb points or anything like that. Despite that, vacation rentals are more popular than ever. In 2022, they're up 20% over 2019 before the pandemic. Airbnb is just enormous. It's hard to put into words. It's worth $100 billion on the stock market. That's compared to Marriott, which is worth $60 billion, and Delta Airlines, which is worth like $29 billion. Airbnb is 3 times as big as Delta Airlines. Airbnb used to be this cool, quirky thing where you'd go and stay in someone's guest room and they would show you around town and you'd like get to know the destination you were going to. I had a ton of these experiences. I went all through New Zealand. I only stayed at Airbnbs. I only stayed in people's guest rooms. It was amazing. I fed lambs on a ranch in New Zealand. I was offered some guy's microbrew that he made in the garage. I learned how the rules of rugby work because I would watch rugby with people when I was there. It was a really special and cool experience. But now, what's happened is that corporations have sort of slowly taken over more of the vacation rental space. And what I mean is a lot of the rentals that you're getting are run by some big company that owns rentals all over town. So you're not always getting that like one-on-one experience with a host. Like maybe they're meeting you to drop off the keys and tell you where like a decent takeout place is. But more often than not, you're just getting a code, you're checking in, and that's the end of your local experience. And this has a lot of cons. Like compared to a hotel where if something goes wrong, there's someone there who can help. With Airbnbs, there's often nobody there. So if there's problems with the plumbing or you get locked out, like you might just be out of luck for the night. This is where all of these Airbnb horror stories are coming from. Like people getting locked out, people finding that the windows don't lock. You know, these are like serious problems where if you were staying with a family, you could be like, oh, hey, this window doesn't lock, what should I do? Whereas when you're dealing with a corporate management company, you have to like send a message and hope that they get back to you. And like, yes, there's no alternative to Airbnb that's better than it in every way, but there are some competitors who are good for certain circumstances. So the first alternative is Vrbo, formerly VRBO, but they've rebranded to Vrbo. The good thing here is that they have a lot of listings that are not available on Airbnb. So if you're just like striking out when you search in a location, it's always worth checking Vrbo. They also have a little bit better search tools in some ways than Airbnb, which makes it easier to filter by things like you're bringing a pet or whatever. The bad part of Vrbo is they have very confusing cancellation policies. They leave it pretty much completely up to the hosts, and they only have standalone houses. There are no shared spaces like on Airbnb. So another alternative is booking.com, which you may not have heard of, in part because it's really popular internationally and less here. And that's actually its biggest strength. If you're traveling internationally and looking for a vacation rental, check booking.com. It's more like professionally managed properties, but the pro there is that there are higher standards on booking.com properties than a lot of other places. The bad is that it's a pretty limited portfolio. There just aren't a lot of properties out there, and there's really not much charm or personality to any of them. It's a lot of just apartments in big apartment buildings. Another kind of fun option is called HipCamp. And this is technically a campsite booking site, but they've expanded quite a bit to a lot of like glamping things, and you can rent an Airstream trailer or whatever. So lots of good, quirky stuff on there. The downside with that is it's all pretty rustic. Quality control might be an issue. There are reviews, but not nearly as many as on Airbnb. So, if you're looking for an adventure, And especially if you're like driving across the country and are out in the middle of nowhere, it's worth checking HipCamp. On the flip side from that, rustic wise, is Marriott Homes and Villas, which is just what it sounds like. It's a vacation rental platform run by Marriott Bonvoy. And the cool thing is you can earn and redeem Marriott Bonvoy points through it. So if you have a big stack of Bonvoy points, you can burn them up on Marriott Homes and Villas. And they have pretty high quality standards. The bad is it's a pretty limited portfolio. And when you use points to book, you're not really getting the best value from those points. And finally, you can always book through a local vacation rental management company. This can help support local businesses and hosts. It's worth checking out, especially if Airbnb is not allowed at all in a particular location. You may have to use a local vacation rental company. So I've been throwing a lot of shade at Airbnb and its competitors. But the truth is, I stay at Airbnbs all the time. Like, the reason I know so much about the downsides is because I've basically lived in Airbnbs for the last few years. So if you are going to stay in one, I have some recommendations for how to make them a little bit better. And my favorite is to pack a bag that has all the stuff in it that will make your Airbnb suck a little bit less. So you can have this just ready to go in your closet whenever you take a trip, or you can, pack it every time you take a trip. But my number one recommendation is a nice pillowcase. Bring your own pillowcase. Then when you lay your head on that like disgusting Airbnb bed, it won't be that like thin, like microfiber, like washed a million times pillowcase that comes with the property. So this one is light and cheap and easy. Also, on that note, you can bring your own towel. Here's my super bougie, whatever towel, but just any kind of towel is going to be better than what they have there. And then always, especially if you're staying in a city, bring earplugs. Earplugs, people, they rarely have them at the property, but you never know what you're going to be staying next to, what garbage truck is going to come in the morning. And then switching over to the kitchen, which I often stay long term, and I do a lot of cooking, and I hate Airbnb kitchens. So this is dear to my heart. Number one, yes, a tiny little sharp knife. It may seem silly if you can like pack it in a paper towel and like put a rubber band or something, that makes it possible. But if you can bring your own little knife that you can do a little bit of chopping just to like chop some garlic or whatever, it can make a big difference. And then finally, on the same note, when you like open that drawer that has like pots and pans all over it and all of the nonstick pans are just like stacked on top of each other and someone has clearly used a fork to like scrape all the Teflon off of all of the pans. So it may seem ludicrous, but I bring my own pan. And like, this is like a cast iron, whatever, it's super heavy. I'm not going to take this on a plane or whatever. But if you're driving to an Airbnb, it's totally worth bringing your own pan or maybe several pans. So I get it. Sometimes we just need to rent an Airbnb, like it's the only good option. I'm actually digging into some research right now, trying to get some data on how it has changed and how it has impacted customers. So if you have any feedback or you have any ideas or there's anything you're curious about with what's changed, please put it in the comments below. I'm really looking for any and all suggestions here. And my hope is that by holding Airbnb accountable and calling out these changes that have happened, that will actually improve the Airbnb experience, that Airbnb will listen and make some changes. So I love staying with hosts. I love the Airbnb experience. I just hope it can become a little more customer friendly. My name's Sam Kemmis. I'm a travel rewards writer at NerdWallet. My favorite Airbnb of all time was actually not a good Airbnb at all, but it was an apartment in Osaka, and there were pictures of John Travolta all over the place. I don't know why, it was never explained, but it will stay in my memory forever.